just need you to admit one thing. That your God does not exist.
For your sake, you should hope that he does not.
Abraham, I know he doesn't. I just need to hear you say it.
What if your God does not exist?
My dear friend, what are you talking about?
Your God. My gods. What if they don't exist?
Well, if God or the gods don't exist, then nothing has meaning.
Or everything has meaning.
What on earth does that mean?
What do you need, your God?
Well, if there were no gods, then anyone could do anything and nothing would matter. You could do as you liked and nothing would be real and nothing would have meaning or value. So even if the gods don't exist, it's still necessary to have them.
If they don't exist, then they don't exist. We have to live with it. I don't believe in the God's existence. The gods are man's creation to give answers that they are too afraid to give themselves.
You may be right, Ragnar Lothbrok, and I may have been wrong.
The world is a mess. The world is as angry as it gets. Well, you think this is going to cause a little more anger? The world is an angry place. All of this has happened. The world is a total mess. The world is a mess, David.
All you have to do is walk into any children's hospital, and you know there's no God. At least no good God. Maybe there's an evil God. Those children are dying at the same random rate, even though their parents are desperately praying, desperately loving those kids, wanting some kind of divine intervention, and yet, as Ann Gaylor says, who's the former president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, nothing fails like prayer.
Suppose what Oscar believed in as he died, in spite of your protestations, suppose it's all true, and you walk up to the pearly gates and you are confronted by God. What will Stephen Fry say to him, her, or it?
I will basically, what's known as theodicy, I think. I'll say bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? That's what I would say.
And you think you're going to get in
on
that?
No, but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to get in on his terms. The God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac. Utter maniac. Totally selfish. We have to spend our life on our knees thanking him?
Indeed, those who disdain my worship will enter hell rendered contemptible.
What kind of God would do that? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. So, atheism is not just about not believing there's a God, but on the assumption that there is one. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
Now, did you come to regret the denunciation earlier this year of an utterly evil, capricious, mean-minded and stupid God?
No, not in the least, because you see, I don't believe in God. This was the basic premise on which the question that an Irish journalist asked me. He said, well, if you're wrong, Mr. Fry, if you're wrong, and there is a God, what would you say to him? So the whole thing is a sort of premise on a premise. It's a supposition. It's a hypothetical, as they say in America.
It was, of course, but he did also say if you meet him at the pearly gates.
That's what I mean.
We are talking about a Christian God.
If you meet someone that you don't believe exists, what would you say? Well, I would say, how dare you?
For those who didn't see it, tell us how you came to conceive of an evil God, a mean-minded God.
I didn't come to conceive of one. I'm talking about the universe as I see it. Yes. I'm just saying, if there is a loving God, how come children get bone cancer? Answer me that. It's that simple. It's not a game. I'm not trying to be funny. It's just, how can you begin to say there is a loving God and give children bone cancer? So they howl and scream in agony and die. Or because I want them in heaven. That's a ridiculous nonsense. That can't be true. It just can't be true. So there is a lot of thinking to be done. And I'm not undermining the thinking that serious theologians do and the branch of scholarship that they embark on to try and justify pain and evil in the world.
Michael, you're an atheist. Many of your best friends are atheists. You debate with people who believe in God. What are atheism's best arguments?
The atheists who take a philosophical perspective use a different set of arguments than I would. They have has to do with the first cause and the prime mover, and they debunk all those. They sort of leave the theist arguments without any substance, ergo, there is no God. The approach I take is more positive, actually, in the sense of there's actually positive arguments against the idea that there is a God. Well, the problem of evil, I think, is probably the biggest one in terms of the way things are in the world and the way things should be if there were a God or not a God. And the way the world is structured with evil, why bad things happen to good people. And I'm not talking about why you hate me and why there's genocide. No, I mean just like innocent children getting cancer. Why would that happen?
The first signs that there was something going on is she became really uncomfortable in her car seat and would fuss and cry every time she was in her car seat. And we thought thought that was really strange. And her dad and I were like, this is the most easygoing, happy baby. But we had been worried for months because we couldn't figure out what was going on with her. So at the time of her diagnosis, when they found what it was stage 4 cancer. It's the worst day of your life as a parent. It was our greatest fears confirmed when the doctors sat across from us after her MRI and said, it's cancer. When you hear those words from a doctor, time stands still and everything else just stops because you become entirely focused on your child's recovery.
In a universe where there's an all-powerful, all-good God, that shouldn't be happening. In a universe where there is no God, that is exactly what would happen. So it fulfills that. It's sort of a prediction.
Right. The argument from evil is a strong one because it leads directly, without a lot of complicated arguments, to the fact that the universe has no God.
I actually can show you how humans and cultures construct gods and religions, and that's a positive evidence in favor of that we invented gods.
Listen, Katie, you gotta know that Connor's fine, and he's being taken care of, and you're gonna see him again.
No, I won't.
Yes, you will, sweetie, I promise.
No, I won't. Because there's no heaven.
Of course there's a heaven, honey.
Prove it.
See, you have to believe.
I do believe. I believe there's no heaven, just like there's no God. Human beings made those things up so we could feel special. More special than animals or bugs. Because we're scared. We need to think there's someone out there protecting us, watching over us. We're nothing. We come from dirt and we go back into the dirt.
See ya.
¡Ay, que se ahora! ¡Con los dos sacos de arco!
Listen, Katie.
Can you please leave me alone now?
Absolutely.
And this is a real test for anybody who's sung all things bright and beautiful. The good Lord made them all, because he also made some things that are not very bright and beautiful, and one of the least bright and beautiful things imaginable, which is a parasitic wasp that has the most extraordinary life cycle. They're called jewel wasps because they're faintly kind of jewel-coloured. They go up to the cockroach. They then impart a sting into its brain, which turns it into a sort of zombie. It doesn't kill it, but it kind of makes it just like, And they then saw off one of its antennae and uses the other one as a lead, literally, and pulls it to its nest. There, it's leading it. It's now pulling it. As you see, it's much smaller than the cockroach.
Good God.
This poor cockroach, I'm afraid, is going to have a pretty miserable time. He then gets packed into the nest, and then he lays eggs inside. And the baby wasp is born in and eats the cockroach alive from the inside, in a very special order to keep the cockroach alive, because cockroach meat goes off very quickly and it's very warm. And that is the life cycle of the jewel wasp. Now, you ask me that there's a benign, divine God who looks down on creation and loves it all. You just ask him how the hell he came up with something so cruel. so unpleasant, so vile. Only evolution could cause that kind of horrible, horrible life cycle for the cockroach. I mean, it's a pretty grim business.
That's another good point. Animals that have to rip each other apart just to survive. We're talking about carnivores.
Ja, ja, ich mach. Einmal draufhalten. Ja, ja. Oh, ich kann auch nicht. Steht der noch? Ja.
Why would God design a system where there's so much cruelty and suffering? Darwin mentioned that there's a certain type of wasp that lays its larva inside other living creatures, and then it eats its way out from the inside.
Here we see the larva actually starting to burrow into the cockroach itself. It will crawl inside and continue to feed off of the internal organs of the cockroach. After another couple of days, it will enter a cocoon.
If all goes according to plan, 6 weeks from the first sting, a new adult jewel wasp emerges from the hollowed-out dead roach.
Is God so sadistic that he designed animals and nature with so much cruelty and suffering? Is that really what you believe? Or is all of this just the blind forces of nature? An uncaring, unloving world. It's just evolution. It's just the world as it is. There's no God involved at all. Truly, there isn't.
Christ. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
Ai, meu cachorro, mãe! 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 Não! Já era! Não! Fred, não! Mãe, não! Mãe, meu cachorro, mãe! Ele que foi pra mãe, senhora!
The most famous problem that you have, if you want to say an all-loving, all-powerful God exists, is the positively colossal amount of suffering infused into the human experience. And this problem for religion is called, as you'll likely know, the problem of evil. But there's something missing from this picture. I'm not just here to restate the problem of evil as if it's anything new. There's something else. There exists such an obvious and overwhelming version of the problem of evil that it bemuses me that so many philosophers leave it entirely out of the discussion, or at best relegate it to a passing paragraph or a footnote or something. I'm talking, of course, about the problem of animal suffering. Now, before you think I'm just getting all vegan on you again, don't worry, that's not what this is. Animals suffering in factory farms, for instance, can easily be explained away by the Christian as a result of human free will. I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about the suffering of animals that isn't human created, the suffering that exists in the wild as a result of natural processes. If human life is, as I've argued, infused with pain, then non-human animal life is defined by pain. Animals in the wild are subject to endless torment from all angles of their existence. They suffer from predation by other animals. Wild dogs disembowel their prey. Venomous snakes cause slow internal bleeding and paralysis. Crocodiles drown large animals in their jaws. The laws of ecosystems, as they stand, require predation, but are we expected to believe that God couldn't have made these laws differently? Is God constrained by these laws? That's the implication of saying that an ecosystem must be balanced in this way. When a lion kills a zebra, the zebra is usually too large to be killed instantly, and so is often asphyxiated to death, writhing in pain over a slow, minutes-long death. I mean, even if predation really is the only way to stabilize an ecosystem, there's still absolutely no reason why it would need to be so painful and so gruesome. God could provide for these animals an instant death, or at least one that's less painful. But he doesn't. He allows that zebra to suffer for minutes whilst its windpipe is caught in the jaws of a lion. Just imagine for a moment what it must feel like to be that zebra. None of this is necessary for ecosystem stability if you truly are the omnipotent creator of natural laws. Right, and animals also suffer from rampant disease, dehydration, and starvation. They have to contend with forest fires and floods and a whole manner of other terrifying natural disasters. It's also true that, compared to humans, an astronomically higher number of wild animals exist. So unfathomably high, in fact, that we can only estimate how big that number actually is. The number of wild vertebrates alone is thought to be somewhere between 10 to the power of 11 and 10 to the power of 14. We're talking trillions of animals, each one of whom will, under the unerring supervision of an all-powerful, all-loving God, likely experience more fear, devastation, and suffering in their lifetimes than we human beings are even capable of imagining. There are many quite famous attempts to reconcile the existence of evil with a loving God. The problem is that a great many of these attempts, which are known as theodicies, by the way, simply don't apply to non-humans. For instance, one popular theodicy states that evil and suffering exists as a result of human free will. Right? If humans are genuinely free, they'll sometimes commit and permit evil. But this doesn't explain why a tree falls onto a deer's leg, causing it to starve to death in confused agony. Right? It's also sometimes asserted that human suffering is justified because it will be compensated for in the afterlife. But unless you believe in some doggy heaven, or that Jesus died for the sake of your pet hamster's sins too, this also doesn't really fly for animals. It's also sometimes said that suffering exists because from it more good can emerge. But what good emerges from animal suffering? And how does it benefit the animals? Most animals are non-rational creatures. They can't learn and intellectually grow in the same way that humans can. What greater good could possibly be served by allowing a koala bear to be burned alive in an Australian wildfire? Now, pause. Think about this. What would we expect to find if we assume that there is no God, and animals in nature are just randomly mutating and evolving and competing for resources with no divine guidance? Well, we'd expect pretty much exactly what we observe in the real world. A messy bloodbath and a struggle for survival. And what would we expect to see if we assumed the existence of an all-loving and all-powerful God? Maybe some level of suffering that we might not be able to fully explain, but nothing even remotely approaching the level of horror and pain that actually exists in the natural world. It is incalculably easier to account for this suffering on an atheistic worldview.
I often get letters, quite frequently, of people who say how they like the programs a lot, but I never give credit to the almighty power that created nature. To which I reply and say, well, it's funny that the people when they say that this is evidence of Almighty, always quote beautiful things. They always quote orchids and hummingbirds and butterflies and roses. But I always have to think too of a little boy sitting on the banks of a river in West Africa who has a worm boring through his eyeball, turning him blind before he is 5 years old. And I reply and say, well, presumably the God you speak about created the worm as well. And now I find that baffling to credit a merciful God, that action. And therefore it seems to me safer to show things that I know to be truthful and factual, and allow people to make up their own mind about the moralities of this thing, or indeed the theology of this thing. Again, people say, how can you put on such savagery of a predator catching prey? and you are milking it for violence. If they saw what you put out on the cutting room floor of this animal in suffering, I mean, it's a very narrow line you have to tread. You cannot, in my view, eliminate it entirely. That is to sentimentalize and to distort reality.
There's a game being played. The game has no function but to harm and destroy pieces, to consume them, to grind them up. And that's all it does.
And this is just one little horror. That's all. This is just one tiny fraction of the real life drama that happens out there all the time. So the fact that we are impressed by this beautiful solar system and this magnificent universe and the whole idea of infinity and you know, whatever, and beautiful tiger stripes, and see all this great symmetry. Well, there's, you know, for every tiger stripe there's a fly laying eggs, you know, in a wildebeest's nose, and the maggots are going to eat its brain. There's nothing incredibly brilliant in that. The imagination of nature in that instance really sucks, okay? I mean, the invention of the AIDS virus wasn't exactly one of nature's most brilliant fucking moments. I'm not going to give it glowing reviews for coming up with such a great idea, okay? It's shit. Nature is shit. We can't even, you know, take the 5 minutes it takes to reflect on our existence, take a look at the maze we are caught in, and assess it rationally and fairly, and realize that yes, it's a piece of shit. And if we don't fix it, we got no business perpetuating it. We got no business injecting new victims into this fucking insane maze rat racy bullshit. Well, this is fucked-hearted, all right? This is stupid. This is idiotic, because the price we pay for it is preposterously high. The suffering and the hardship and the agony and the rest of it is just obscene. Doesn't mean anything somehow. Somehow it's not something we can even put into our brains and acknowledge the existence of, because we can't even accept a few minutes of it or a few hours of it in one individual. And then you multiply that by millions of sentient creatures falling into all sorts of traps every day and all sorts of trauma. And to not be at least paused by it, at least to have some realization of this price hit you in the face and say, whoa, I just don't think that's asking too much from human beings, intelligent human beings. Unfortunately, I think if they really think about it and they go past pause, it's going to get kind of dark. Because that's the fact of our existence. This is a bit of a trap we're in. Life is in a trap. Conscious sentient creatures are caught up in a game of life that is not well constructed.
With a method of killing that appears cruel, dogs are much maligned as vicious, unfeeling brutes. Although his death is violent and brutal, it is merciful at the same time. He will not have to endure another minute of the loneliness, bewilderment, and pain that was this terrible day.
Holy shit. It's a fucking goddamn slaughterhouse. What the fuck am I doing here? This place sucks. This whole thing smells like shit. What's the rational thing to do? I think the rational thing to do is go up to Dr. Frankenstein and say, what's your vision here, fuckwit? What's the master fucking plan? Do you have a permit to do this shit? Because if you don't have one, you know what? I think we're gonna burn your fucking castle down. Society is basically saying if you're complaining, you're sick. I think the standard for sickness is broken. I think your standard is shit, to tell you the truth. This whatever spectator bullshit, this life journey bullshit, yeah, I think you're the sicko.
I mean, let's look at what we are. Let's look at where we came from. Let's look what we were 10,000 years ago. And what we were functioning to do. What are we based on? We're based on a device, a machine that was invented by nature billions of years ago that consumes and reproduces. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything else. It consumes and reproduces. It doesn't have any other mission. That's our Adam and our Eve. No mission besides that. Consume and reproduce. Period. And that blueprint is still inside of us. So intelligence, I think, looking at the whole thing, would say nature sucks. It's not that complicated. It's a simple ethic. There's all this deprivation and need created, and then it satisfies a little tiny portion of it. And in the process of satisfying that little portion of it, it consumes in harsh ways these other organisms. They are eaten alive. Their sensibilities brutalized. The horror is not only unimaginable on an individual scale, as a collective amount of horror that has taken place, there's no way to incorporate into our intellect. There's no way we can even put it on the scales. The mass is so huge. So certainly it sucks. It's a shitty design. Only an idiot would validate it. And what's your argument? How would you expect anything else? How could nature do anything else but suck, likely? And in all likelihood, it doesn't have a God running it. It doesn't have an intelligence running it. The underlying forces are really simple. So how could we expect anything close to perfection? That's not what crude forces create. They don't create perfection. When you add up all the evidence, this is where it points. And we have more than enough evidence to convict on this crime. We got it from the DNA evidence. We've got the circumstantial evidence. All kinds of evidence that all point to the reality that this doesn't have anything to do with purpose and intention and something's will or any of that crap. It has to do with what happens when matter acquires the capacity to reproduce itself. And it evolves for 4 billion years.
Being an atheist seriously and fairly looking at what evolution is, which is baby killer, the murder of most of the organisms on Earth before they even reach maturation. So there's the 5-minute argument and then there's the 3-hour argument. But the logic's kind of just clear. If you take the truth of a cold universe seriously, a universe that isn't thoughtful and clever and sensible, reasonable, or any of that stuff, doesn't have any capacity to know the difference, is dumber than the dumb animals we kind of mock. Our responsibility as the intelligence on Earth, the intelligence in the universe perhaps, the only one, we have a huge responsibility. All the pain that happens on Earth is our fault. We make it possible by letting it alone, by condoning it, passively or overtly. It's our fault now. It's just the truth. You can't just blame the universe, the system, because we can stop it. And that's the truth. I guess that's one of the arguments that has to be made, is just the argument of accountability. What are we voting for? Slaughterhouse or no slaughterhouse? Meat grinder or no meat grinder? This is all it takes. Yes or no. That's the only effort they have to extend. We don't exist for a good reason. Something intelligent didn't design us or initiate us or make us or do any of that shit. We're not fulfilling some intentional goal. Even if we contrive a goal, you can't really imagine what the goal would be. It could be at all sensible. Grow another inch taller, jerk off a zillion times. There's no goal here. It's just a stupid, redundant grinding up of these things that are full of ambition. They go through life, mostly fail, and then die. Rinse, repeat. It doesn't go anywhere. To confuse purpose and meaning is to make a critical error. There's substantial meaning in existence as a consciousness. Every single one of them was meaningful. That's the whole point. This is the value, and it just gets ground up, disposed of. Some of these consciousnesses become quite eloquent, beautiful, and they're still just ground up, they're still just disposed of. Wisdom is a beautiful thing. Seeing the truth for the first time. These are all beautiful experiences, but they're also beautiful in the sense of establishing invulnerability to doing it wrong, or being stupid, or being inefficient. Knowledge and wisdom. These things do make us better at living. So these aren't meaningless things. Certainly our experience isn't meaningless. It's highly meaningful, so very expensive. Precious. It's meaningful. It's the truth. Evolution creates suffering and promise of pleasure as a mechanism to control behavior, enslaving organisms every day. It enslaves them with these mechanisms. The bee drone, the ants, organisms are just ground up. They have value as shark food. They don't have value as having a dignity or an importance or a meaning to nature or evolution at all. Evolution produces unnecessary suffering. That's why the design sucks. That's why the process of evolution sucks. What is ephilism? Ephilism is an acknowledgement that the function of DNA replication, living things, once they acquire sentience, is waste. Now there's something of value to waste. When they're just robots, when they're just machines that aren't feeling, who cares? Let the matter dance however it wishes to dance. But when it starts dancing on pain receptors in brains and obnoxious feeling sensors, then there's an important value that can be wasted, can be unnecessarily squandered for no profit. The word waste is pretty much an acknowledgement that life is fundamentally and intrinsically beyond repair. It doesn't make function, it makes friction. It makes waste. It doesn't create anything but opportunity for failure. And that's it. It makes the harmable and then it harms it. No sense to it. No sense in opening the door to it. Because none of the stories we could possibly ever tell would ever be worth the torture imposed to tell it. The delusionary experience of, oh wow, what a fascinating story. It makes me feel, ooh, comfortable. But why? Because you're afraid of a world that didn't tell you that story. You're discomforted by a world that doesn't give you lies to live by. The native condition is miserable. And all you're trying to do is put band-aids on it. Try to heal the wounds of existence, wounds of need and deprivation. And we don't do it profitably. It's a disproportional distribution of the pain. Even the things you think are free, a smile, some little pleasantry, they're not really free. The comfort you derive is going to be proportional to the hunger endured. More importantly, in the environment, in the DNA gone wild world, the waste is so much more extensive. And it's the maintenance of that system of redundant torture and destruction that can't be justified. There's nothing we're doing that can justify it. There's nothing in the good that can pay for the imposition of the bad. It's just wrong to impose on something like torture. The other argument is more to do with just this fundamental nature of the psychology and the fact that even though we think there's a game to play, it's a loser's game. You're just fighting to get to the surface of the water. You're fighting not to drown. You're not going to profit from this experience. You're just going to minimize your losses. You'll feel grateful. Hey, I'm grateful I don't have. You can go through the list of all the things you can be grateful you don't have. 2 heads. A dead brother stuck to my side. Oh, I can feel good. Oh, I don't have it as bad as that. But that's an artificial comfort. It'll get you to the surface. It'll get you a gasp of air. But you shouldn't need the air in the first place. If I was to put in a sentence what constitutes the meaning of spelling life backwards, life fundamentally can't run a profit because there's absolutely nothing in the universe. There's no broken that humans fix.
When you look at the elegance of the apparent design of, say, a cheetah or a lion and the antelopes that they're hunting, if God has designed both of those, then God has designed the lion to be an extremely good antelope killer, and at the same time God has designed the antelopes to be extremely good lion escaper. And you sort of wonder, well, whose side is God on? Why doesn't he make one side or the other win? Nature is very, very cruel. It's exactly what you would expect if there were no God. You would expect nature to be cruel, because you would expect that antelopes and lions, cats and mice, dogs and rabbits would be the end products of a long evolutionary arms race in which each one in evolutionary time is pressing the other one, just like the arms race between the Russians and the Americans. Each advance on the predator side is countered by an advance on the prey side, so that the end product of the arms race is that both the lions and the antelopes are very, very good at what they do. The lions are extremely good at chasing antelopes. The antelopes are extremely good at escaping from lions. The result is extreme cruelty, extreme pain, extreme fear. And it's precisely what you'd expect if it had come about through evolution.
The world around us contains an immensity of suffering. As far as we know, it always has contained, as long as there have been sentient beings, which goes back many millions of years, an immensity of suffering. Can we really believe that a God who is described as all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good has created such a world? I think this is the major stumbling block to belief in the Christian God. It's always been, for me, the thing that has made it impossible for me to believe in such a God. A God who deliberately and knowingly created a world like this one could not be a good being. We might say either this kind of God was evil, or this God was a bungler. There are no other options. Christians, of course, deny either of those alternatives. And so most Christians say, well, God gave us free will. Free will is somehow seen as a great gift, something that is essential, and indeed the importance of which in some way overrides all the suffering that Dinesh mentioned, and indeed all the suffering that humans have created in the world. Now, I think we might question whether giving humans free will is worth it, given what many of them have done with their free will. But let's just leave that. Let's just accept that claim, if you like. Let's just accept that somehow it was so important that we should have free will, that God could give us free will knowing in advance that the Nazis would murder 6 million innocent people, that Stalin would murder 20 million innocent people, that Pol Pot would murder 20% of the population of his country, and so on and so forth. Let's assume that God nevertheless did that. It is still the case that there is a lot of suffering in the world that is not explained by this, because there is a lot of suffering in the world that is nothing to do with anyone's free will. We all know that, we've all seen it. We've all seen natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, droughts, diseases, which strike people down, cause them to suffer, cause them to die, sometimes horrible, agonizing deaths, drawn-out deaths, or cause them to live in unspeakable afflictions, agony, constantly hungry or thirsty because of a drought, perhaps, that has caused crops to fail. And we can't explain that in terms of free will. It has nothing to do with free will. Nor can we explain it in terms of saying that we are fallen, as Christians tend to say, and therefore none of us are innocent. Because even if you believe that, and let me say, I think it would be a totally monstrous doctrine to believe that God would create a world in which, let's say, a 2-year-old child would die a slow and lingering death from hunger and thirst because that baby's alleged ancestors, Adam and Eve, sinned. Again, I would think that would be a monstrous God who could make a baby suffer for that reason. But even if you still think that, even if you still think that the suffering of that baby is somehow deserved because of original sin, what about the suffering of non-human animals? They also die slow, miserable deaths through droughts or hunger or disease or a variety of other causes. And not even Christians believe that they suffer from original sin. They're not descended from Adam. And that suffering has been going on even longer than human suffering because they've been sentient beings, sentient animals, for even longer. I think it's inexplicable on the Christian account of the world that animals should suffer in those ways. And I have to say, I could not possibly worship, I could not possibly revere a God who did that. If somehow it were proved to me that there is such a God, an all-powerful God, my attitude would have to be one of contempt and defiance, whatever it cost me. I think I would not have any integrity if I worshipped such a God simply because he was all-powerful when he was such a monster.
I want you to know something. This is sincere. I want you to know, when it comes to believing in God, I really tried. I really tried. I tried to believe that there is a God who created each of us in his own image and likeness, loves us very much, and keeps a close eye on things. I really tried to believe that, but I gotta tell you, the longer you live, the more you look around, the more you realize something is fucked up. Something is wrong here. War, disease, death, destruction, hunger, filth, poverty, torture, crime, corruption, and the ice-capades. Something is definitely wrong. This is not good work. If this is the best God can do, I am not impressed. Results like these do not belong on the resume of a supreme being. This is the kind of shit you'd expect from an office temp with a bad attitude. And just between you and me, if in any decently run universe, this guy would have been out on his all-powerful ass a long time ago. And by the way, I say this guy because I firmly believe, looking at these results, that if there is a God, it has to be a man. No woman could or would ever fuck things up like this. If there is a God, if there is, I think most reasonable people might agree that he's at least incompetent and maybe, just maybe, doesn't give a shit. Doesn't give a shit, which I admire in a person and which would explain a lot of these bad results. there is no God. None, not one, no God, never was.
If you use the argument from design, which I think is a discredited argument, if you looked for the evidence of a creator from design, you'd have an easier time proving the existence of Satan than you would of a divine and benevolent and all-loving God. It'd be far easier to say that this was designed by someone with an extremely unpleasant sense of humor.
What you're about to see is really disturbing. It's very difficult for me to speak.
The argument from design naturally will teach. It will teach that the devil made the world. The evidence is all around us. Are you happy now? Not really. These people are total strangers to any concept of intellectual honesty.
Well, we know that 99.9% of all species that have ever existed just on this planet have become extinct. So heaven has already watched almost 100% of its creation die off, often in very unpleasant, callous circumstances, with folded arms, right? And that's billions of years of geological time. Some people say the Homo sapiens has been around for 100,000 years, some for as long as 250,000. No one says less than 100,000. Francis Collins, the great Christian believer who did the Human Genome Project, says certainly 100,000. I'll take 100. Richard Dawkins thinks it's more. I'll take 100. What does it mean if we're divinely supervised and divinely created and what we looked out for? It means that for 98 or so thousand of those years, humans, Homo sapiens, were being born, dying, half of them in childbirth, I would think. Life expectancy maybe of 20 years, maybe 30, people dying essentially of their teeth, out of hideous diseases, living in permanent fear. Where are the earthquakes coming from? Where are the lightning strikes coming from? Why is all this? What are these diseases that hit us? We don't know about microbes, we have no idea. That's to say nothing about the fights with neighboring tribes over women, over land, over meat, over subsistence, the torture, the violence, the cruelty that goes on. I don't need to underline all of it, I hope. You can picture it for yourself. 98,000, first 98,000 years, heaven watches this going on with perfect insouciance. And something like 2,000 to 3,000 years ago decides, right, we have to intervene now. We have to do something about this. Well, what would be the best way of intervening to try and redeem this rather bleak picture? What about having somebody tortured to death in an obscure part of the Middle East? That ought to cure it. Or if you're a Muslim, what about getting an illiterate epileptic shepherd to start babbling and saying that he's been talking to an archangel? Or what about inventing the figure of Moses in a mountain that's never yet been found by any geographer, Mount Sinai? That's what you'd have to believe. I've got a minute, right? That's what you'd have to believe, and that's why I ask myself, why do the worshippers of this God want to convict him of being such a crummy designer? Most of his creations die off, and the rest suffer miserably.
Unintelligent design is going to create huge volumes of waste and sloppiness. There's going to be paint on the walls, food on the floor, however you want to metaphor it, but the retard ain't going to do it right. And there's going to be a mess made. And that's the dilemma of the true atheist, is accepting the fact that he's part of a big waste engine. An engine that has 99 times more friction than function. Crude forces in control of precious commodities. That's the real game. So all these little happy-pappy, sing-songy, pink balloon chasing, life is fun, fun, fun atheists are basically not atheists. They obviously think they're accomplishing something as being part of something's finger painting. We should be awestruck at 4 billion years. We should be contemplating the idea of these organisms eating each other. All the wrong ways things could have gone. I mean, the world still could be dominated by dinosaurs. If it wasn't for a stupid meteor impact, there'd be no grace or beauty or dignity or art. It'd be a crude, dirty, ugly, it'd be a bug planet. Okay, that's what it would be. Life isn't all anything. It's a whole pile of shit that happens over years. That's the way we live a life, over a period of years. We know where 99.999% of life has been for the whole history of life on Earth. And it hasn't been contemplating the universe, hasn't been doing any of that crap. Tiny, tiny fraction, 1 grain of sand in a whole beach of time has been spent by human beings in the history of life, doing this high-minded conversation about how joyous and wonderful life is. Life is a reproducing, a replicating piece of DNA. A piece of DNA 4 billion years ago, through some mechanism, was rendered capable of reproducing itself. And that has just continued and continued and continued in all these manifestations for no rhyme or reason, to satisfy no purpose, to accomplish no destiny, to do none of that. It's just an accident of biology, of chemistry, to create what we call biology. If you take the broad picture of history, it's pretty dismal, okay, because we really haven't demonstrated much capacity to escape this idea that we're going to solve problems with violence. And that's going to be a real problem as this technology gets better and better, and we have drones, and we have robots, and we have all this other crap. You know, war is going to get insidiously messy. Conflict is going to get insidiously messy. Even these microbes and things can be incredibly destructive. You've got all kinds of weapons that are going to be out there in the hands of people full of hate, and we haven't demonstrated any capacity to do anything to fix this hate problem. So, yeah, you should be a little pessimistic. I think pessimism is the rational perspective. It's all about these ideas anyway. It's about what you fill your brain with, whether you're filling it with nonsense and rubbish and wishful thinking and daydreams about a wonderful DNA ride, or a recognition that it's not a ride. It's a dumb molecule doing biological experiments.
Just this whole context thing. I guess you people just never asked the question soon enough in your life, or never had the thought, what if that was me? What if that was me? What if that was me? I mean, that happened for me really early. It just seemed very natural for me to start doing that, to start saying, well, what if I was that thing? Or what if I was that thing? Or what if I was that thing? And then all of a sudden the world gets a little more brutal, a lot more brutal. And it's harder to find rationality in any of it, sensibility in any of it. The good die young. I mean, we can give 100 little trite phrases, but I mean, yeah, there's just no value to this torturing people while they die. Why should my grandfather die of leukemia for 10 years? I was young, 10 years old, and I'm somebody I just had such an affection for. He's just being killed right before my eyes, slowly, a little piece at a time, being pulled off of him. How the fuck do you people make sense out of that? How the fuck do you people say, that's okay, that most valuable thing in the world, picked to pieces? Yeah, so what? It happens. No big deal. Yeah, move on. Sorry, you people fail. animals are pushing the envelope. They don't live balanced lives. Birth and death are not the only harshnesses in their existence. It's a perpetual struggle to survive. They are scarred and beat up all through life. If it isn't parasites, it's carnivores. It's not an easy life. And even among the carnivores, I mean, they fight with each other, they kill each other. There's no balance. The balance is war. If you want to call war balance, that's your prerogative, but I don't see any balance in war, and nature is war. A lizard or a vole, yeah, it's just not a great life. I mean, it's not an elaborate consciousness. It's just going to be living in fear and running and chasing, and it's not going to be doing any Shakespeare reading. It's not going to be listening to beautiful music. The suffering, that's the real question. It all comes down to it. Mother Nature is a myth. There isn't any reason to presume nature knows what it's doing, or that it's doing anything worthwhile. So much of what we live for is an addiction. You know, we want it because we want it, you know, not for any intellectual reason, but because our body aches for it, because our very being aches for it. We just need it. We don't make a judgment about the validity of the need. All we know is that we need it and we want it. We can think about the satisfaction of a good meal. We can think about the satisfaction of ego victories in life, you know, those things that make you feel good. You know, relationships are a big part of our lives, and sex, and the reward we get in that relationship, the satisfaction we get anyway. But even those relationships in and of themselves do have a cost. I mean, they do cost us emotionally. They're difficult to maintain. All of a sudden, relationships change. Suffering is a given. We know that's a bad. We know that suffering in and of itself is a negative thing. Figuring out what the good is that compensates for that suffering is where the question gets complicated.
It's not a complex philosophy. You don't need a whole bunch of complicated math. If you're a rational person and you realize there's no magical gods or leprechauns or fairies that are running the universe, you're stuck with evolution. You look at evolution honestly, it's not a nice process. It's a gladiator war. There's a ton of defeated for your one victor. His victory will be short because he's going to be just ground up eventually too. So it's all just playing a little king of the hill temporarily game based on this passion, this addiction to play the game. Some silly notion that you're going to actually be able to accomplish anything truly valuable besides cleaning up messes. That's all there is to do here. The only thing you can feel good about is preventing harm, because there's nothing else to do here that's worthwhile. The game is kind of dismal. It's a stupid molecule replicating and huge carnage. Kill 95% of players when they're children. That's the game we're playing. That's what your life costs. All the harm that happens in the world happens so you can have your little moments of gratification. So you get your little yum yum moment and somebody else gets cancer. And that's the price paid. That's the rules of the game, so to speak. Can't have one without the other. So you're basically saying it's okay, go ahead, torture some kids, kill some kids. I'm worth it. I'm worth all the animals that have to die to create my portion of the biosphere that I'm feeding on. I'm worth their pain and suffering. If you're stupid enough to think that, Nephilism isn't for you. You somehow have agendai based on your preposterously inflated ego. The fact that you actually think you can win, that there's victory here to be had, grabbed, held, owned. And it won't be owned. You'll just be cut up into little pieces like everything else. You can hold on to the edge and think, I'm winning, but no. The meat grinder's gonna get you and it's gonna grind you up into little tiny pieces. It's gonna kill your kids in a violent and horrible way. It's gonna kill everyone. And it's likely to do it first by torturing them for a good long while. Sometimes for their entire fucking life. Just struggle, and then die. So if you're rational and you look at the world the way it is instead of the way you would like it to be, it's a bad game. There's no rationalizations here. There's no way to justify it, to change the fact of it. Millions tortured for your existence, having parts of their body ripped off and having to live with it, having their entrails dragging behind them for a few hours before they finally succumb. Being eaten alive. This is a price being paid. So you can sit there and think you're accomplishing something, you're winning. That's the kind of victory you want? So yeah, there. Is that complicated? You need a whole book to understand. This is the consequences of the fact that there is no creator, there's no grand purpose here. You're just horny and hungry little animals, that's all. You got this insatiable ego that just says, I know I'm winning. I'm going to die with my boots on. I'm going to win. I'm going to have all of these wonderful things. I'm going to get there somehow. I'm going to win the lottery. You can't see how your life is just built on silly hope? Desperately silly hope? Of some dream of the life you're going to live? Not the reality, factual statistical odds. No, I won't pay attention to any of those rules, because I'm special. It's not a rational philosophy. I'm just caught up in a fucking meat grinder. I'm just caught up in this mechanism that's just going to grind shit up, kill everything in the end. It's just a bunch of brutality for a silly game show, for a trivial podium holding your gold medal. All of this price paid for this piece of shit. It's completely illogical and nonsensical to say, I can justify the pain. Give a kid cancer. I'm worth it. That's what you're saying. Eat an elephant alive. I'm worth it. That's the truth of existence. Unless you believe in a fairy tale, unless you believe some psychotic god stuck your penis or your vagina on you and said, go fuck the world. Like you have some kind of brilliant mission besides cheating and conniving and scheming for your own welfare. I mean, this is pathetic. That you can't have a rational conversation about the dilemma we're stuck in, the carnage of this brutal and stupid game of ambition. Let's send 6 people in a spaceship to go say, what, being human is so spectacular, we're so interesting. You're butt fuckers. Pieces of shit. I mean, you're useless. Don't pretend it's any more than your horny addictions that you live for. Do we have a purpose? Our purpose is just to get more complicated? Purpose in just becoming more complicated? Come on, the game is all about our desire. That's all it is. It's a chasing desire game. And it's all contrived through evolution by a damn molecule, you dumbasses. Consumption, reproduction, for no end. There's no end here. There's no purpose here. It's a mechanical process, like fire or like any other chemical process. Once it starts, well, boom, it's going to keep going until it runs out of fuel. This is just so reckless. We're a type of fire. We're a forest fire. We're a chemical reaction that's going to keep on happening because this one cell acquired the ability to reproduce itself. There was a suitable environment and nothing killed it in any one stage of its existence. And so it's just going to keep doing this shit until, you know, it runs into some kind of brick wall. And the brick wall won't have anything left to consume. I mean, the layers of living things will be so thick that that house of cards will fall in on itself. An asteroid, the planet blows up, some sort of scenario. But the idea of deliberately taking this stupid thing that we're doing, we're fucking goddamn bugs. Let's build a $1 zillion spaceship and put a mosquito in it and send the mosquito off to another planet to go do mosquito stuff. For what? It'd be a stupid thing to do. It'd be goddamn idiotic. Let's go send some praying mantises into space. But I really haven't got to the meat of the argument yet. We should run into this amazing problem where the argument doesn't even have to be made. If you can get the God delusion out of people's heads and the nature delusion, you know, somehow nature knows what it's doing. I mean, once you defeat those two delusions, there's nothing to argue here. I mean, the facts are obvious and they point directly to, we are just caught up in addiction. We are just addicted to this shit. So we keep doing it. We keep doing it because we're addicted, damn it. We're not doing it for a fucking rational reason. We're doing it because we're horny for another day. And we've been made horny. Just so fucking being played. The strings are just so now obvious that what's pulling them is goddamn a fucking microbe, you assholes. This will be like the basic intention. Like if you had to sum up life in one paragraph, this is the one paragraph I wrote. And basically it'll be the job of the book to explain why this is the truth. And all your other bullshit is just that bullshit. We humans are just one of the eccentric forms of reproducing matter that has evolved over billions of years on the material planet we call Earth. We do possess the faculty of consciousness, the ability to think and feel.
But in simple truth, that ability serves no intention, and there is little probability that we can put that faculty or ourselves to any universally constructive or more than contrived purpose. We are in fact as a kind incapable of doing anything of merit beyond cleaning up the messes we and the rest of the material universe make. Life is in fact just a harmful parasitic infection that can at best only achieve the minor brilliance of perhaps someday terminating the mistake that was its instigation. So there, that's the truth. That's the fucking truth. Best we can do is get the fuck out of this game. Take our losses, get up from the table and say, that's enough, no mas. Quit fucking with this goddamn thing, because you can't win, you dumb asses. All you can do is scratch itches. Do you understand that? Something has to bite you, something has to irritate you, fuck you up, before you can go to the process of relieving deprivation, your misery, your itch, your negative. And that's all we can do is just fix the negatives. Negatives that don't have to fucking exist in the first place. All purpose is a delusion. All purpose beyond janitorial duties, beyond managing the suffering that's all the fuck around you, you assholes. As a human race, what the fuck have we done to merit going to any other planet and doing it over there? We've got billions of animals in captive, harsh, brutal, torturous slavery. Most of the human population is living in squalor, in shit, just eking out existence. Even if we perfected this stupid thing we call life, it's still accomplishing nothing. It's merely entertaining needs that don't need to exist. This is not scratching any itch the universe has. There's no fucking truth out there in the universe any different than the truth that's right here, right in front of your fucking faces. Life is stupid. It's fire. That's all it is. It's a chemical fucking reaction.
It's all about a reproducing fucking molecule, damn it. Will somebody prove that it's not about a reproducing molecule? That our oldest living ancestor wasn't just a reproducing machine? And it didn't do it on purpose? It didn't say one day, I'm going to now cause the chain of events that will create zillions of life forms and they will evolve over billions of years. It didn't make a judgment and say, this is a good idea, I think I'll do this. No, it farted. It just shit. All of a sudden it reproduced. Its chemistry finally got right. Just happened. It reproduced. And then its copy of itself reproduced. And then its copies of itself reproduced. And there, the game started. But it didn't initiate. There was no finger, no intelligent finger poking that first event, looking over it and saying, this is great. Now I can watch the chain reaction of horror. And go through 4 billion years of Tyrannosauruses and all kinds of shit eating each other and the whole mess. And it's a horror story. It's not a fairy tale, damn it. How come people have to keep turning this into some sort of golden unicorn, Puss in Boots, happy ending kind of crap? It doesn't have any of those things in it. It doesn't have any elements of that. It has this crazy, ludicrous prospect where it takes 20 years to finally grow a brain, and then you figure out that you're not going anywhere. You're going to a grave. What the fuck? You're gonna fucking start rotting. You're gonna decompose over decades. It'll take you decades to do it, and then you're gonna die and be in a grave. That's your destination. This isn't magic, fantastic design. It's crazy. You mixed all this consciousness together, it comes out to a big, brown, ugly pile of shit. For most people, it's mediocrity and work, tedium and backache or headache or some other kind of ache and misery here and a complexification there and a chores and this, and it's a lot of bullshit to this thing living. And we have it good. We have it sophisticated and cleaned up. We're not living out fucking there. Come on, people. Just insane, this nonsense. You keep contriving this bullshit, these excuses to say this all makes sense, it's all of design, we're going somewhere, we're accomplishing something. And we're doing nothing, we're doing the same thing over and over and over. We're just chasing tail, literally chasing tail. There's nothing to be accomplished here. You're just driven by desire. Desire pushed into you, built into you by nature and the conditioning and your culture and all the rest of this crap. There's so much of it is subjective crap. The crazy people are running the nut house. It's really the way the world is. And if you're rational enough to see the truth, yeah, you're going to be in the minority. And it's a sad fact that most human beings are just caught up in the chase. They're just rats in the stinking maze. They won't slow down for 10 minutes, climb up the wall, and take a good look around and figure out where the fuck they are. No, they're just too caught up. They can't resist. They smell the cheese and they just keep chasing it. I mean, that's all we're doing. Built on that stupid design, that stupid DNA molecule. Consumption and reproduction.
You are in a position to claim truth, probably about lots of things. You're just saying, I want to keep this idea that science hasn't revealed the truth, which is, you're just a psychology. Okay, a completely fuck-nutted, addicted Looney Tune who's chasing something that just doesn't exist. You're chasing happily ever after, and it doesn't exist. You're heading for a brick wall, a bloody mess. If you get any satisfaction or real comfort in life, it's going to be momentary and it's not going to last. And that's the way it is. It's just stupid. Look back on your life and say, well, what would you pay to redo any of that? Come on. We're chasing better, okay? That's why science exists. It's not running from religion. It's not fighting religion. It's looking for something to hold on to, something to say, well, look, we're going to get rid of this disease shit. Let's get rid of this hunger shit. Let's fix a problem somewhere. And they just treat symptoms, unfortunately. We're more in the Band-Aid business than we are in the penicillin business, however you want to metaphor it, and that's what science is stuck in. And science is owned by capitalists, so yeah, they don't have any imagination, so we really don't go for the big deal, the big finish, the big let's do it right one time and just get it over with. No, none of that shit happens, so we keep doing it the wrong way, the sloppy way, the shortcut way, the tacky plastic way, and yeah, I agree that's dumb, but that's not the problem. Okay, the problem with life isn't scientists, the problem with life isn't religious people, the problem with life is this life is stupid. It's a stupid chase. Everything about us only exists because a cell acquired the capacity to reproduce and then evolved for 4 billion years. Evolved through basically a carnage of competition. Fitness was defined by a silly definition. Yeah, the other guy's dead. That's the definition of fitness. The other guy's dead. We're a psychology. We're little need machines chasing our fucking potato chips, whatever metaphor fits for you. And that's all there is here, shithead. There ain't nothing else. We've been contrived to run a race for which there is no purpose in running. To survive for the sake of surviving. We're the thing that comes out of 4 billion years of running a stupid wheel. The universe is a bunch of cold, hard, nasty physics. There isn't anything soft and fluffy out there. And if there is anything soft and fluffy, it's in just as big a fucking bucket of shit as you are. You're not going to be able to help it, and it ain't going to help you. It's not science's fault human beings are motherfucking greedy and selfish assholes, and that every bit of technology you give them, they use it and abuse it and suck it dry. All right, the fact that scientists figured out how to make gasoline out of crude oil isn't a crime. The fact that human beings can't moderate their consumption is the crime. We've discovered that human beings are absolutely full of shit. They'll find a God anywhere. Anywhere there's a little bit of fog or a little bit of doubt or a little bit of mud, and they'll say, I saw God in it. And they see it on their cheeseburgers and their waffles. They see it all over the fucking place because they're looking for it. They're looking for something. Magic. All right? There isn't any. Sorry. Okay? There is no real magic. There's just, 100 or so elements and some forces like gravity and strong and weak nuclear forces and a gazillion little pieces of stuff moving, okay, for no reason, just because it was caused to move. And this is how it all ricochets, and we're just the fucking ricochet. We're just the chip that flies off the rock, on the misfire. There's nothing here. There's nothing here to do. It's all goddamn bullshit. And the more we talk about these phantasmagorical possibilities, the more we delay getting real and recognizing we've had nuclear weapons less than 100 years. We have absolutely no prospect of ending this violence that we use as a solution to problems. This is a disaster waiting to happen. And if we have anything to cling to, it is if there's any hope at all, the only desperate hope we have is that we can somehow convince the human race to gracefully get off the stage before it completely humiliates itself. That's what I wish people would talk about, this bigger picture. What is the bigger picture of this game we're playing? What is this picture actually a picture of? What is it besides train wreck in the end for everyone? Sometimes horrific train wreck. Minimize the wreck. Avoid the train wreck. And have the graceful exit instead. Why am I supposed to think this is a rocket that goes somewhere? That this is yes, this is winning. I have a good feeling. I won enough. That's good enough. It's all worth it because I feel all comfy today. We're just stumbling. We're just stumbling through a stupid existence, and then you fall down, and you get up, and you fall down, and you get up. Why? Why? Your life will not get better. You will just get old and die. You will not happily ever after. You will, holy shit, I had to watch the thing I love debilitate and die. Why? Why? It's not going to have a good ending. It's going to have a catastrophe as an ending. I mean, if you bought the new car and they showed you the videotape of you driving the car and flipping upside down and crashing into the brick wall. I mean, if they showed you the future, would you buy the car? I mean, realistically, would you really buy it with that ending if you knew that's the ending? And this whole life thing, we buy it because we don't really look at the ending. You will get ground up. You're talking like it can work because what? You happily drive in the convertible a few days, waving your hair, blowing in the wind, and everything's wonderful. It can't work. I mean, it's just a fantasy film. Eventually, it's going to crash. Your life will crash. It'll burn, it'll melt, it'll deform, it'll stink. Statistically, you can know exactly what's around the corner, and frankly, you can see that around the corner is just going to be around the fucking corner. The big death guy is going to fucking hatchet you. You are not going to live forever. You're not going to defeat the menaces that are going to squish you like a bug. The cliff doesn't have like that sharp edge. It has a little bit of an incline, get you some speed going, and then it throws you onto the rocks. You are going to be killed by your life, okay? And you may be killed in a most disgusting and horrible manner. Hope will show you no mercy. I'm an ethicist, an extinctionist. What evidence is there that sensation has something to do with intelligence? I mean, high intelligence. No evidence that sensation cares about how intelligent you are. Capacity to feel was something that happened a long time ago in evolutionary history. And the fact is that doing our thinking thing might make us less sensitive. We might have dulled our senses to be able to do this vocabulary thing and to compose sentences and communicate with language. We might be a lot duller as a sensual organism than the rest of the little beasties running around. There's no evidence otherwise, in my opinion. There's no evidence of any correlation between depth or intensity of sensation and being able to do algebra. Zero. I think everything should, as soon as possible and as gracefully as possible, go extinct, because there's no form of life that is reasonably efficient. It's all unreasonably too expensive for the nonsense that it is, which is build a hill, fall down the hill, build a hill, fall down a hill. Make a need that doesn't need to exist so you can satisfy it in some silly way. Make a whip so you can create a shield against the whip. Stop making shit and then you don't have to clean it up. Not complicated.
really isn't complicated. The statistical truth of the world as it is that the more intelligent somebody is, the less likely they are to have kids. Most people, right now, aren't having kids sufficient to maintain human existence. Most people, 80%. And it's only a small percentage of the human race that's creating all of the growth in population. It's just a matter of getting the 80%, or some percentage of the 80%, to acknowledge a responsibility to stop the 20% from acting irresponsibly. You don't want them raising the next generation anyway. You don't want the next generation of the human race to be raised in ignorance and squalor. It's stupid. You don't even have to be an anti-natalist to recognize this is a train wreck. I mean, you're just asking for idiocracy. Making desire, creating it where it doesn't exist. Making the hungry thing so you can feed it gruel. You can't make that reasonable. The thorn has to go in before you can feel the pleasure of its removal. And that's what your maturation is a bunch of thorns going in. And some of those thorns you're never going to remove. You'll only get a glimmer of what it's like not to have them. That's how the game works. It's not a positive game, it's a negative game. I'm not going to apologize for my passion. Fuck that. I think it should bother you, frankly. I think if your brain is working properly, you should be bothered. Most people think it's just about this human condition thing. It's the whole process of DNA mutations, thinking they're accomplishing something in a world that doesn't need their existence in any way whatsoever. It doesn't enhance the universe in any way, just creates this huge liability of creating torture that doesn't need to exist and happiness that doesn't need to exist. There's no deficit felt until we show up to create it and then say, ow, there's a deficit, we need to fill the deficit. We're the problem. There is no problem the existence of consciousness isn't creating. There is no problem that the existence of consciousness is not creating. There's no need that exists without us being here. There's nothing that needs to be fixed or changed or altered in any way messed with. The universe is just fine until you put feeling things in it, and then all you have is problems that need solutions. All these animals are trapped in their ignorance. They can't get out of the maze. We have the intelligence to climb up, see that the maze is really badly designed. It's a death trap, this rickety roller coaster. We're just going to be the last riders, and then we're going to close the carnival. We're going to do one of those implosion things you see on TV. The old crappy building is going to be done for. Sanitizing the rest of the world to just end this blight of animals being tortured. Again, for that one turtle. 10,000 little turtles have to die. For that one. You get one, you kill 10,000. That's a ratio. Nobody reasonable thinks that's a good idea. Nobody has any kind of empathy or capacity to internalize for themselves. Would I want to be part of that racket? Would I want to be born something that has a 1 in 10,000 chance of reaching maturity? 10,000 times I have to die badly? Who would say yes? Nobody. Nobody who wouldn't be certifiably insane.
The God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac. Utter maniac.
Here's a little bit of intelligent design here. Here's one that wants to accept the science, but then is like what's before the Big Bang. We don't quite know yet, so God was there. So of course, intelligent design is basically a God of the gaps. But my favorite way to end this then is to just reflect on, I want to do it just a fast tirade on stupid design, and this will be fast. Look at all the things that just want to kill us, okay? Most planet orbits are unstable. Star formation is completely inefficient. Most places in the universe will kill life instantly. Instantly. The people that say, oh, the forces of nature are just right for life. Excuse me. Just look at the volume of the universe where you can't live. You will die instantly. That's not what I call the Garden of Eden, all right? Galaxy orbits that we orbit once every couple 100 million years, you're bound to come close to a supernova that will wipe out your ozone layer and kill everybody on the surface who doesn't otherwise have dark skin, because your high energy rays will give you skin cancer. We're on a collision course with the Andromeda Galaxy. Gone is this beautiful spiral that we have. And of course, we're on a one-way expanding universe as we wind down to oblivion, as the temperature of the universe asymptotically approaches absolute zero. That's the universe. Then Earth, volcanoes, tsunami just killed, I think that number's higher, up 200,000 people, floods, tornadoes. None of this is any sign that there's a benevolent anything out there. And this 90% should be 99%, as was earlier noted. That's of all life that has ever lived is now extinct. Inner solar system is a shooting gallery, comets, asteroids, duck. And look how long it took to make multicellular life. Not from the beginning of the Earth. Life happened quickly, but not multicellular life. You needed your cyanobacteria to sort of crank on the oxygen, get the oxygen budget going. Then you could have that's sort of rocket fuel for multicellular creatures. But that took 3.5 billion years. That's hardly an efficient plan with us in mind. And in human beings, this is like the most tragic of them. I don't even include here the expression of free will where people want to kill each other. I'm talking about nature killing us without the help of human beings. Aggressive childhood leukemia, hemophilia, all of this. And we so much praise about the human eye, but anyone who's seen the full breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum will recognize how blind we are. Okay? And part of that blindness means we can't see, we can't detect magnetic fields, ionizing radiation, radon. We are like sitting ducks for ionizing radiation. We have to eat constantly because we're warm-blooded. Crocodile eat a chicken a month, it's fine. Okay? So we're always looking for food. These gases at the bottom, you can't smell them, taste them, you breathe them in, you're dead. Okay? So, I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time here. So, and with the birth defects, most are unknown. Look at this. Others, it's like abuse and infection and stuff that human beings had something to do with. We have no idea. Oops, I pushed a button by accident, sorry. No idea. No idea. And, and birth defects are tragic. They're tragic, particularly if they happen to the family afflicted by it. And you just look at images of these aborted fetuses because of and most of these are stillborn, others are born with a heart outside the body. None of this is any sign that there's a benevolent anything out there.
Allah loves each and every single one of us in this room more than more than our mothers love us.
That just makes no fucking sense. I mean, it's just bullshit. Fuck. Oh my.
Cut the bullshit! Cut the bullshit!
And so, this is all simply stupid design. And the problem is, if you look for what is intelligent, and yeah, you can find some things that are just really beautiful, and really, hey, that's clever. The ball socket of the shoulder, and a lot of things you can point to, but then you stop looking at all the things that confound that revelation. And so if I came upon a frozen waterfall, and it just struck me for all its beauty, I would then turn over the rock and try to find a millipede, okay? Or some kind of deadly newt, and then put that in context, and realize, of course, the universe is not here for us, for any singular purpose. My favorite of all is, of course, you eat, breathe, eat, and drink through the same hole in your body, guaranteeing that some percent of us will choke to death every year, okay? Imagine if you had a separate hole for breathing and eating and talking. That would be just really cool, right? You could drink, breathe, and just talk, and you would never choke, all right? And it's not a hard request. Dolphins breathe and eat through different holes in their body. And that's a mammal. So this is like Santa Claus could bring this one. And this one, of course, my favorite of all, what's this going on between our legs, right? As you've heard, you've heard it. It's like an entertainment complex in the middle of a sewage system. No engineer would design that at all, ever. It's like the wrong juxtaposition of elements. And so what I want to put on the table is why, so that's the end of my talk, but I want to say, I want to put on the table not why 85% of the National Academy rejects God. I want to know why 15% don't. And that's really what we got to address here. Otherwise, the public is secondary to this. Thank you for your attention here.
Another thing which creationists really hate is evidence for evolution is bad design. And almost any animal or plant is just a mess if you cut it open and look at it inside. You can pick out numerous features of our bodies, our bad backs, the way childbirth occurs, the recurrent laryngeal nerve, etc. Here's just one example. The prostate gland is a miracle of bad engineering. Only a moron engineer would design an organ that's prone to swelling that surrounds a collapsible pipe, okay? It's simply bad design. It makes no sense from an engineering standpoint. It makes perfect sense from an evolution standpoint because we know from embryology and other things that the prostate gland evolved from the walls of the urethra that it surrounds.
The implication of intelligent design is that God is a very, very bad engineer. Think of the example of the human eye. The neurons that register the signals in the retina are inside the eye. So for those signals to go to the brain, these nerve cells get collected in the optic nerve. The optic nerve has to cross the retina. So we have a blind spot. I mean, an engineer who have designed an eye with the optic nerve having to cross the retina will be fired. An engineer that we have designed the human jaw would be fired. Our jaw is not big enough for all our teeth. So we have to pull the wisdom teeth and very often have to straighten the others. God making this trivial, obvious mistake and errors of design, well, maybe their God does those things, certainly not mine.
There's a nerve called the recurrent laryngeal, which runs from the brain, and its end organ is the larynx, and you think it would just go straight there. But in a human, what it does is goes down into the chest, loops around one of the main arteries in the chest, and then goes straight back up again. Obviously a ridiculous detour. No engineer would ever make a mistake like that.
What I'm actually holding here is the beginning of that nerve. It actually starts out not as a separate nerve, but as a branch coming off of a bigger nerve called the vagus nerve. And this is going to keep running all the way down the body. So you'll see it again over here, all the way down the neck on both sides. So you can see it again right there.
Yes.
And right over here, there's a branch right there. So it's looping and it's coming back, it's doing a U-turn all the way down here. So it's traveled that entire distance to make a U-turn to go all the way back up again. This is the voice box, the larynx, and so you can see it going right into the back of the larynx here. Interestingly, where it ends is pretty close to where it started. It started here, coming out of the brain. It really only needed to go about 2 inches.
Yes, amazing.
But it went all the way down and came all the way back.
Yes.
This is not an intelligent design. An intelligent design would be to go from here to here. Fish really don't have much of a neck, so there isn't any extension to worry about in a fish. It just goes directly there. Once you introduce a mammalian neck, you start to get a longer neck, now the heart is displaced down lower.
Remember that a designer, an engineer, can go back to the drawing board, throw away the old design, start afresh with what looks more sensible. A designer has foresight. Evolution can't go back to the drawing board. Evolution has no foresight.
Hair loss is a huge cosmetic defect and an evil mistake of nature and evolution. Nature can go to hell. I want hair. Slapheads will tell you things they know are not true, like shaving your head will make you look like Jason Statham, Vin Diesel, or The Rock, when the reality is you'll probably end up looking more like that albino kid from the movie Powder, or like that guy from The Wife's Boyfriend meme. And even if your aesthetics are top tier enough that you can look good despite being bald, chances are you still will drop several points in the aesthetics department, since no matter how good a face may look, you need a good head of hair to frame a handsome face. That is why even bald men who look good would still look better if they had a full head of hair, and that is only in the best case scenarios. For most people, the results of losing your hair are catastrophic and life-destroying. I mean, just take a look at this video from a British dating show.
And bring on the boys! Welcome to the show, sir. Take
Thank
it
you.
away and give it your best shots.
Hello, lady. My name is Emmett, and I'm from Roscommon.
Hey, girls, that's Emma from Roscommon, but tell us, are you turned on or turned off?
Shocking.
Ooh.
Holy shit. I don't want to be too mean because, I've been down that path before. I know how it feels. But, just looking at this guy, you could tell he has other glaring problems as well, such as being weak, effeminate looking, he's a manlet, he's a new male. But you'll notice all the initial criticism from the women was aimed at this man's lack of hair.
And talk to Nadine. Nadine, what happened?
He kind of looks a bit old and he's baldy like me dad and...
Okay. Shannon, lights off for you as well. I'm doing my best for you here.
It's just the hair, the lack of... I'm sorry.
Well, as you can see, it is hair or a lack of hair that leaves the first impression on those you meet, and nothing leaves a worse impression than when someone sees a person who has a shaved ring of hair that looks like a toilet seat around their head, which is appropriate because in this day of age, you have got to have shit for brains to let yourself go bald. It doesn't matter what your other merits may be. If you don't give a good first impression, people may dismiss you outright, and you leave a terrible first impression when you are bald. First impressions are key to establishing good relations with those around you, and nothing leaves a good impression better than a full head of hair. I don't care how much you work out or how much muscle you build, if you look bald, most people are going to think you either look like a thug or have some sort of contagious disease, and they won't want to be around you. Hair loss is a huge cosmetic defect and an evil mistake of nature and evolution. Nature can go to hell. I want hair. You can see from this figure, the synthesis of testosterone is regulated by the hypothalamus in the brain, which produces gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH in this figure. This stimulates the production of luteinizing hormone, LH in this figure, from the pituitary gland, and this causes synthesis of testosterone by the gonads, as well as the adrenal gland, which is why women also produce some testosterone. So, testosterone is the main male hormone that circulates in the blood. It is mostly bound to proteins including the sex hormone binding globulin, aka SHBG, and also to the protein albumin. For effects on muscle strength, it is testosterone that interacts with the androgen receptor in the skeletal muscle to promote anabolism, which of course is muscle growth and also has effects on erectile function. However, in very specific tissues, namely the skin, the prostate, and you guessed it, the hair follicles on the scalp, testosterone is converted by the 5A reductase enzyme into the more potent metabolite DHT. If ever there were an argument which debunks intelligent design, this is it. If ever there were an argument which debunks intelligent design, this is it. If ever there were an argument which debunks intelligent design, this is it.
You have to deal with the consequences of there not being a God. Okay, so I guess we're going to have to explain to you that, you see, the consequence of, I mean, it's really easy to explain. I mean, I don't know why I even have to say it to you. But, you know, the consequence of letting a retard build your house is that you'll die in your house, you see, because the retard doesn't know how to engineer a house. He can try to build one 1,000,000 times, and guess what? He's a retard. He's not going to be able to figure it out. He's not going to understand the weight distribution and the physics and the whole thing, and he's going to come out like shit every fucking time. And so you can't invest in that. And just as you can't presume that nature knows what it's doing. You're basically, your argument to me is, you nature lovers, you followers of the nature god, your idiotic argument is that a crude force is, chemistry, and an implication once life started of the fact that it would necessarily, because it only had two objectives, consumption and reproduction, that would maximize, create organisms efficient at doing that consuming and reproducing thing, and it had no capacity to understand any further than that, and that was the standard by which success was decided. That system has in it no engineering capacity. It has no capacity to do what's required to build a reasonable house, because it takes a little more than that. It takes having an understanding of what the implications of pain and suffering and all that stuff are. And so if you're going to invent something like that, if you're going to use something in the structure like that, if you're going to expect to build a giant ballroom or something, you've got to understand that there's weight problems here. You got to distribute all this weight of ceilings, and it takes engineering to do that, and it takes engineering to make to take something like consciousness, vulnerability, suffering, the capacity to be harmed, and to manage it. It requires intelligence. You can't do it stupidly. You have to do it intelligently, or you will do it badly. Okay, and that's what that's why we got crocodiles. I mean, that's why nature created what it created: little viruses, smallpox, polio, because nature didn't know any better. Because it didn't have the intellectual capacity to say, "Oh, that'd be a really dumb idea. I'm not going to do that. That would be really, really fucking stupid." Nature can go anywhere within those parameters of consumption and reproduction. I mean, theoretically, it could create an organism where you give birth to a baby and it basically just starts eating you, because you're a good first meal. And that'll make your child more competitive because it'll have this huge head start where it got a great first meal. I mean, it can create such an organism. There's no rule against it. And its create organisms are pretty damn close to that. If it's at the wrong time of year and you're gonna, a lot of babies don't survive because they get eaten by their own damn parents. It happens. It's really irritating that we have to go back this far. That atheism really doesn't mean anything because you're playing the same game. You're caught up in the same memes, the same traditions, the same bullshit. And you don't take any responsibility for the consequences of what you call your belief system. You're claiming you're applying more intelligence, okay, by relieving yourself of the God delusion, but you're not showing any of that intelligence because you're not taking responsibility for what it means not to be deluded by the prospect that there is an intelligent designer. No, the designer is unintelligent. It is unintelligent creation. It is unintelligent design. Yeah, I'll use their vernacular. All right, it's not engineered by intelligence. It's engineered by forces that have no brain. They have no capacity to understand what they're stepping into. No capacity to understand the implications. We can, because we have acquired through that process incidentally a capacity to do this abstract thinking thing, to be rational and logical and informed. Through 10,000 years of educating ourselves, we've acquired a knowledge base that makes us a functional intellect, one that can really get the right answers, that can do the engineering. And we can look back at that system and realize just how completely fucked up it is. And we gotta find some other way to justify our existence than to say, well, we're part of nature and nature's okay. because by every rational and intelligent observation or bit of applied reasoning, there's nothing okay about a circular, stupid system that's eating itself. It's cannibalism. Sentience eating sentience. Creatures that are harmed by suffering, imposing suffering. It just doesn't go anywhere. It's like creating a machine that produces gasoline and then eats the gasoline. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere, except in this scenario, it's eating more than it can possibly produce. And that's what we're doing. We are imposed with need for no good reason, but because it made our genetic material more successful. But the need doesn't need to exist. We have to come up with a defense for our existence. If you're going to be aggressively pro-life, pro-nature, pro this whole circular bullshit, you're going to have to actually explain why it makes sense. And you can't use some kind of bullshit of cycle of life bullshit. It doesn't make that doesn't answer the fucking question. It's not a legitimate answer. That's fucktarded engineering. Because you're obviously you're incredibly dense. You can't even get the obvious. There's no God. That means there's no designer. That means there was no engineering. I mean, you can't add up those three things. You can't do that little tiny bit of logic. Then yeah, we are fucked. There's just no fucking point in talking. Just none. Just fuck it. Whatever. You're fucking hopeless idiots. There's no escaping this stupid God delusion. You just can't do it. You can't let go of your own fucking goddamn addiction. You think your fucking vision isn't clouded by your fucking desire, and of course it is, you idiots. Wake up, smell the shit.
Warning, viewer discretion is advised.
Some may find the following difficult to watch.
বেশি হয়ে গেছে দিন না তার আগে না ঠিকঠাক সময় তো এই পেটের ছবি টবি করাননি কে হয় বাচ্চাটা আপনাদের কে হয়
فتبارك الله أحسن الخالقين.
So blessed is Allah, the best of creators.
What kind of God would do something like that?
What kind of God would do that? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. So, atheism is not just about not believing not believing there's a God, but on the assumption that there is one. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
How can there be a compassionate God who is all-powerful and has created us, yet we suffer? Why create such a world in the first place?
Richard Dawkins, you can reflect on that and the previous question.
Well, it's hardly my business to say how could a compassionate God like that exist. Darwin himself said it was impossible for him to believe in a God who was capable of creating such suffering. He actually was talking about suffering in the animal kingdom.
Do you assume that suffering is a natural part of the human condition?
It's a natural part of the living condition. It's a natural part of Darwinian natural selection, which is one of the reasons why I was so keen to say that I didn't want to live by Darwinian principles. There is massive amount of suffering in the natural world, a huge amount of suffering, and it seems to me that's an almost inevitable consequence of Darwinian natural selection. I'm more interested, however, in what's true than in what I would like to be true. It would be very nice if there were no suffering in the world. It would be very nice if there were a sort of natural scale of justice, as the Cardinal was saying. But I'm more interested in what's true. So it's not the business of an atheist to justify the ways of God to man. It is the business of a cardinal.
Okay, let's go to the Cardinal. The question was, how can there be a compassionate God who's all-powerful and has created us and yet we suffer? Why create such a world in the first place?
I think that's probably the hardest question for us to answer.
Do you struggle with it?
Yes. If I get a chance to say, to ask a question when I die, I think I'll ask the good God, why is there so much suffering? That's a problem for us.
If there is an omnipotent and all-powerful God, why does he let these things happen?
That's a very good question, but if God is going to allow us to be good, he's got to give us freedom. There's no alternative to that.
I'm not trying to argue against religion on this occasion. I'm not saying there's any... I understand the desire of anybody to seek spiritual rewards in a complex and difficult to understand world. We don't know why we're here, where we're going. We want answers. We love the idea of answers. How marvelous it would be. But there are other choices. I am merely saying there are all kinds of ways we can search for the truth. You do not need this imperial panoply of marble and gold.
في اللحظة دي
And Willie, we're with you on remaining AP start.
في طفل بيتولد، أبوه وأمه هيكتبوه في شهادة الميلاد مسلم. في اللحظة دي في قسيس بيغرق طفل لسه مولود في المية عشان يبقى مسيحي. في أم بتلبس بنتها اللي عندها 5 سنين الحجاب. في أب واخد ابنه اللي عنده 4 سنين الجامع عشان يعلمه ازاي يصلي. في اللحظة دي في آلاف الأطفال بيتولدوا، كل واحد فيهم هيورث الدين اللي هيلاقي أبوه وأمه عليه. آلاف الأطفال كل لحظة بيتولدوا وهيلاقوا نفسهم ما بين أكتر من 4000 دين ومئات الآلاف من الطوائف. دلوقتي أكيد كل الأديان دي بتختلف عن بعضها في حاجات معينة، بس في حاجات كل الأديان دي بتشترك فيها، كلها بتقول إن هي الديانة الوحيدة الصح، كلها بتقول إن كل الناس في باقي الأديان التانية غلط، كلها لها طقوس وعادات أصحاب الديانة دي لازم يعملوها، كلها بتوعد اللي هيخش فيها بالجنة، كلها بتهدد اللي مش هيخش فيها بالنار. نظرة واحدة للدايرة دي أي واحد هيفهم إن في حاجة غلط. بس الاعتراف بإن في حاجة غلط مش بالسهولة دي. إزاي الملايين اللي في ديني دول كلهم غلط؟ اللي بحس براحة نفسية وأنا بصلي. مين اللي جاب الكون؟ لما أموت هروح فين؟ نفترض طلع في الآخر إلهي موجود، هعمل إيه ساعتها؟ آلاف الأسئلة اللي كفيلة بإنها تخلي أي إنسان يخاف يفكر. بس الأسئلة دي هي نفسها إجابة السؤال الأهم اللي أنت من جواك بتخاف تسأله لنفسك. هو إيه اللي أنا بعمله ده؟ خليني أحكي لك قصة دينك. من بداية تطور وعي الكائن البشري على الأرض وهو بدأ يعطي اهتمام بالأشياء الغريبة في الطبيعة حواليه، بدأ يقدسها. الأمر كان ليه علاقة بخوفه من المجهول، زائد إن عنده القدرة على التخيل. على عكس بقية الكائنات الحية كان عندها خوف بس ما كانش عندها القدرة على التخيل. وللأشياء اللي قدسها الكائن البشري كانت الصخور. قدسها لأنه كان بيستغرب إزاي الصخور بتكون منفصلة عن بقية الأرض مستوية. كان بيجهل إن الصخور هي نتاج عوامل التواءات القشرة الأرضية، ما فيهاش أي شيء عظيم. لكن خوفه وجهله بالسبب خلاه يعبدها. خوفه وجهله بالسبب خلاه يعبدها. بعدها عبد الشهب والنيازك. كان بيعبدها لأنه حاسس إنها شيء عظيم، كان فاكر إنها بتظهر كعقاب على شيء غلط عمله. بعدها قدس الحيوان وعبده. بعدها عبد عناصر الطبيعة، الهواء، المية، النار، وبدأ يتخيل إنه كل حاجة منهم وراها كائن بيتحكم فيها. بعدها عبد القمر والشمس. بعدها بص الكائن البشري الأقوى منه وعبده. تحول الكائن البشري من إنه يتخيل آلهة يفسر بيها اللي مش فاهمه إلى شعوره بإنه لازم يعبد حاجة ويصلي لها، إن ده هو الغرض من وجوده في الحياة. وفضل الكائن البشري ضمن ملايين من قبائل مختلفة على مدار ملايين السنين بعبادة آلهة كتير، لحد ما وصل لإنه يقدس ويعبد الآلهة الموجودة دلوقتي، الآلهة المخفية. الإله المخفي هو اللي جابنا على الأرض، هو اللي جاب الكون. الإله المخفي هو اللي بيموت الناس، هو اللي بيحييهم، هو اللي بيشفي، هو اللي بيمرض، هو اللي يكافئ اللي يعمل حاجة كويسة، هو اللي يحرق أي حد يعمل حاجة غلط. هو اللي جاب كل شيء بس مفيش حاجة جابته. هو الجواب على كل شيء. بس بدراسة تاريخ الأحياء هتعرف إن الإنسان موجود على الأرض من ملايين السنين، ودينك لسه فاكر ينزل من 1000 سنة. بدراسة تاريخ الأديان هتفهم إن أيا كان دينك اللي أنت عليه دلوقتي ما هو إلا تراكم عشرات الأديان اللي كانت قبله. مفيش أي دين موجود على الأرض، كل الطقوس والقصص اللي فيه كان هو أول من ذكرها. عمرك سألت نفسك إزاي في أديان كانت قبل دينك ذكرت حاجات موجودة بالحرف في دينك؟ زي الفراعنة من آلاف السنين قالوا إن في يوم بعث وحساب وعقاب. بعدها بآلاف السنين جات اليهودية اللي قالوا لك إنها أول ديانة تنزل من السماء، وقالت إن في يوم بعث وحساب وعقاب. إزاي الزرادشتية قالت إن في جنة ونار وخمس فروض صلاة ووضوء وتشهد. ويجي الإسلام بعدها بآلاف السنين يقول إن في جنة ونار وخمس فروض صلاة ووضوء وتشهد. إزاي أوقات وحركات الصلاة في الإسلام هي نفس أوقات وحركات الصلاة في الزرادشتية. الدين فكرة الكائن البشري عملها عشان يحاول يفسر الكون حواليه. الأديان مش قواعد نازلة من السماء، الأديان اتعملت على الأرض. حتى القرود بيمارسوا طقوس دينية زي البشر. مفيش حاجة اسمها آلهة، مفيش آلهة خلق الكائن البشري، الكائن البشري هو اللي خلق الآلهة. فكرة ريح بيها دماغه من التفكير، جواب يملى بيه فراغ أي سؤال هو مش عارف إجابته. طب أنا هروح فين بعد ما أموت؟ لنفس المكان اللي كنت فيه قبل ما تتولد، مش هتكون موجود. بص لأي كائن حي قدامك وشوف هيروح فين لما يموت. هينتهي زي ملايين الكائنات الحية اللي بتموت كل لحظة. لكن بالرغم من الإجابة موجودة قدام عينيك إلا إنك مش قادر تتقبلها. أنت عايز تحس إنك مميز، شايف نفسك أهم شيء في الكون. اللي علمك بحجم الكون مخليك تعتقد إن الكون موجود عشانك. الكون مش موجود عشانك. الكون كان موجود قبل ما انت تتوجد ب14 مليار سنة، وهيستمر بعد ما انت وكل الكائنات اللي على الأرض تنتهي إلى ما لا نهاية. وجود الكون مش مرتبط بيك، الكون هو السبب في وجودك، مش انت السبب في وجود الكون. افهم. طب الكون ده كله جه ازاي؟ معقول جه لوحده؟ محدش يعرف الكون جه ازاي، بس لازم تعرف ان العلم بيقرب كل يوم من الإجابة، وفي يوم هنعرف، والإجابة ساعتها مش هتكون الدين، مش هتكون معجزة، مش هيكون الإله زيوس هو اللي جاب الكون، مش الإله أمون، مش هميرة، مش ياوه، مش يسوع، مش الله، ومش آلاف الآلهة التانية. الإجابة هتكون أعظم من كده بكتير. لو في جملة واحدة ممكن تفسر الكون وأي سؤال أنت مش عارف إجابته هتكون كالآتي: أي شيء يعارض قوانين الفيزياء والطبيعة هو شيء غير موجود وغير حقيقي، فكل ما هو موجود وحقيقي يمكن تفسيره طبقا لقوانين بالإمكان دراستها، سواء كان هذا الشيء كيفية نشأة الحياة، أو كيف جاءت الخلية الأولى، أو كيف جاء الكون نفسه. أي شيء تجهله هو ببساطة شيء تجهله. طب مين اللي هيحاسب الإنسان اللي بيظلم، اللي بيقتل؟ مين اللي هيحاسب هتلر بعد ما مات؟ مفيش حد. الموت هو عقاب كافي لأي كائن حي. مين يحاسب الأسد اللي بيقتل الغزالة؟ مين يحاسب العنكبوت اللي بيقتل الحشرات؟ مين يحاسب الكائنات اللي بتاكل بعض كل يوم؟ اللي بالنسبة للفريسة ظلم بالنسبة للمفترس طبيعي. زيك لما بتقتل حيوانات وبتاكلها كأنه شيء طبيعي. مشاعر الظلم والعدل والكره والحب كلها عبارة عن هرمونات موجودة جوا خلايا عقلك، مش قوانين الكون ماشي عليها. تخيلك ان في كائن في السماء يحاسب الانسان اللي ظلمك بعد ما مات هو تمني زائف بس عشان تعرف تعيش مرتاح. يعني كده الانسان اللي ما عندوش دين ممكن يعمل اي حاجة براحته، يعني ما عندوش اخلاق. غلط. بص لاكتر الناس اللي ما عندهاش دين في العالم وقارن ما بينهم وما بين اكتر الناس المتدينة. قارن ما بينهم وما بين الشيوخ اللي انت بتسمع لهم وبيقولوا لك اعمل ايه وما تعملش ايه. اياك تفتكر ان دينك هو اللي مخليك تعمل صح. اياك تعتقد ان دينك هو مصدر اخلاقك. الاخلاق هي انك تعمل شيء انت حاسس من جواك انه صح بغض النظر عن اللي بيتقالك. اما دينك هو تنفيذ اللي بيتقالك بغض النظر عن احساسك انه صح او غلط. الاثنين عكس بعض تماما. ان يكون عندك اخلاق يعني تعمل خير عشان انت من جواك بتحب الخير، مش عشان في حد بيوعدك بجنة او بيهددك بنار. تخيل قد ايه الاديان ممكن تعمل انسان لما تدفع مليارات عشان اكتر من 1,000,000 واحد يروحوا يلفوا حوالين حجر، او اكتر من 80 مليون واحد يروحوا يحجوا في الديانة الهندوسية. انا مش جاي اقول لك انك مش فاهم الدين صح، او ان الشيوخ مش بيمثلوا الدين، او انك المفروض تسيب الشيوخ المتعصبة وتسمع الشيخ وسيم بيلبس كاجوال وهو بيفسر الجرائم اللي بيأمرك بها دينك بطريقة تانية عشان يحاول يقنعك ان الدين يسر مش عسر. مش جاي اقول لك ان المفروض تسيب الوحش في دينك وتمسك الحلو، او انك محتاج تقرا الاف الاديان التانية عشان تعرف ان في حاجة غلط. انا جاي اقول لك بص على الصورة الاكبر، بص من بعيد وانت هتفهم ان المنظومة كلها غلط. المنظومة كلها مبنية على خرافة.